All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to our monthly membership gathering. We've got awesome guests here today from the Midline Revolution. We have Michelle, Dr. Molly, and Natalie. Hopefully I said, I'm not even going to try last names, but so yeah, these are the leading ladies from the Midline Revolution. And I am eager to introduce what they're putting out into the world. And I'm just going to let them introduce everything that they have and, you know, what uniqueness they're bringing to the world all the way from Hawaii. And I will turn it over to y'all.
Molly, you want to tell our birth story?
Oh, sure. Well, Natalie and I was in practice in Maui. Michelle had moved there. And Natalie and I had hooked up. She's an IBCLC on Maui, and we were going to do a lip and tongue tie chat in my office. And little did we know, this legend walks in. Knew nothing about Michelle and like lip and tongue tie world, to be honest. And so Natalie's freaking out before, like, Michale Chatam's coming. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I'm so I wish there was drama. I can't create the drama. Like, I don't know. And then, so we had the chat, and then afterwards, some of the women wanted their babies to be worked on, and Natalie and I had been individually seeing a few of the families, and we weren't really getting the results that they were wanting. Things weren't really changing for their like breastfeeding journeys and for their like oral function. And so Michelle starts working on babies, and she's talking about bowspring. And my mentor had birthed his whole chiropractic practice out of bowspring methods and things like, and there was a ton of synchronicities. And then we were watching these families with Michelle, and Natalie and I were just blown away. And so
transformed. They were
literally
fully transformed.
One of the moms after that night had said she had an out-of-body experience watching her baby like be worked on with all of us around, and just like the way that the baby was opening, and her breastfeeding experience literally since that day was night and day. It was her third baby, night and day difference, fully like charged the baby up, and they've been rocking it since. So that's the origin story of Midline Revolution and how we all got together. Then Natalie and I did a practice genesis with Michelle. And then Natalie and I had created our own neuroposturing, which is where we work in postural blueprint method, which is born out of Michelle's stuff. We utilize the IBCLC expertise and genius, and then we do chiropractic care. So we do that all kind of intertwined. And then we needed to fill the gap with like everything online too, because everyone has questions and everybody wants to know all the things to do. So we created Midline Revolution, and as an educational company and platform to bring information and really just like be kind of like a surrogate community for people all across the world that don't have the practitioner resources in their area, so to say. And a lot of it's really Michelle's work in the foundational pieces of, you know, turning on your human and what we need to be thriving as in this human meat suit. And then from there, we go into the pieces of the oral function for infants and the breastfeeding dynamic. Origin story, done.
Yeah. These are the things we say like all the time. So we're like, let's just say them. And then for less than a consult with one of us, somebody can hear it from all three of us. And so that's kind of what we did. And then we created the community where people can come in and get specific, you know, bring specific things, and we're able to interact with them. So, and then we also created a 30-day discovery at a lower price point, so people can have an experience over a short amount of time where they can begin to open themselves up to literally the empowerment of themselves. So our foundation is sustainability, autonomy, belief that the body has the literal power to repattern and heal and create a new blueprint based, you know, even from like what we were given at birth, or because of birth, either way. And that's kind of like the philosophical platform. What we've seen in the craniofacial world is we've demonized these 7 natural, normal places of attachment in the mouth, and we've taken them out of context and made them a diagnosis, which eliminates any potential of actual involvement with the system if you think that it's separate. But you cannot, you can't unify that which is not separate. So if you act like it's not separate, and that there's a foundation that you can heavily impact with basic concepts, then it really does change the lens. You put on a different set of glasses, and you actually take ownership over your situation and create a new experience.
And that's
And
what
I
happened
think-
for us as practitioners too, was
Yeah.
your awareness expands. You're not just looking at the mouth anymore. You're looking at the entire system, and you're looking at the environment in which the system's growing in, like a plant. And then you're looking at the family ecology, and you're looking at all of those pieces, and it's transformational.
When we
Yeah.
tried to like build this to be like what we saw in this community, especially from the lactation point of view, was that we've even seen it like recently, like people are giving checklists for what to do when their baby is diagnosed with lip and tongue tie. And the way that we come at it is not what to do, not a checklist, but how to be. And in doing that, in the being, it's transforming the whole family. And it's been amazing to see, because Molly and I still work with many babies together within our neuroposturing. And it's been amazing to see some of these babies that they would have gone and gotten a frenectomy really, really quickly. And some of these kids are absolutely thriving with all of their frenums still attached. And yes, there are some that need it, but it's just been a really cool way to like help encourage families on how to be. And it's not like take the red lights and the red flags off, and it's not an emergency situation, and take a step back. And sometimes just in the taking of the step back, we see huge amounts of healing happen.
Can I jump in and ask a question? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want maybe explain what the course is that y'all are offering to everyone, but also I want to back up a little bit because I know there's some parents in here and I got some questions. Like explaining a little bit what the definition of a frenum is, and why they're not terrible, and you know, starting there. But yeah, can we start with that?
I would love to answer that.
That's Michelle's jam. What is a frenum?
So a frenum is a piece of connective tissue that unites either 2 bones or 2 musculature sets or muscle to bone, and we have them all over our body. Do y'all hear this shenanigans going on in my yard? I'm so sorry. He's like, my rooster, Mr. Whiskers, he goes nuts about this time in the morning. So, so like this is a frenum. This piece right here is a frenule. It's a frenulum, frenum. They're called different names, but it usually starts with FRE. So I call them our friends. These are our friends. Some of them overextend their welcome or their help, right? So sometimes we actually have to help them. But we have these attachments all over our bodies. We have them here. We have them in our perineum. We have them actually in our neck and our throat. So these natural occurring connective tissues actually help hold us together, right? But sometimes they overhelp, and they can overhelp for different reasons. Sometimes they are tissue that forgot to die, like in the like we call it apoptosis. So they forgot to die, or they didn't get the signal to die and carve out the space. They didn't create the space, right? Or sometimes because they're nervous system responsive tissues and they respond to other influences in the environment, they don't have this fluidity and flexibility. They're not hydrated. They're not supple. They're not safe. So they don't have this natural waveform movement that goes with the human. And interestingly enough, in the oral cavity, I call this the 20% of our 100%, the body is the 80%. In this section, we have actually quite a few, but in the mouth specifically, we have 7. We have 3 in the upper lip, 3 in the lower lip, and 1 under the tongue. And those are naturally occurring attachments in the body. So it's an anatomical given that you'll have these attachments, but they're called frenums or frenula. One of the big mistakes that I call it the oral function industry is making is referring to them all as ties. They're not ties. They're only a tie if they're not responsive in the way that allows optimal function. Then we say, okay, what remains? After we get it moving, after we look at it, after we address the nervous system innervation to the tissue, then we're like, okay, well, now what? You know, and we keep asking questions and we keep acting like it's part of the body. And then until we get down to the little kind of nitty gritty of, okay, is this really something that needs to be, you know, addressed with a surgery? So that's the big picture to little picture of these frenulum attachments.
That's awesome. And it sounds like what you just said, it's labeled a tie when it's not optimally functioning.
Right.
I would say that's our definition.
Okay.
Mainstream, the industrialized dentistry is a lot of restricted tissue, our ties, and it's not, Michelle always says, is it the reason for what's happening orally, or is it a response to what's happening? So the functional piece is huge when you're diagnosing something.
Because structurally, you can have something that looks very restricted, but it may have very good functionality.
Which always blows our mind.
Yeah. Okay. So then, so what are you seeing? Okay. So you said this is our definition. What are you seeing in compared to like y'all's outlook or paradigm shifting beliefs, philosophy, compared to kind of what's going on in mainstream right now? And I like personally, I see like just in the office, like we've swung the pendulum so far of let's diagnose everything as a tongue tie. And now like just here in small town Texas, you know, I'm lucky that we have a more holistic dentist who will refer to the chiropractor before. But it's not always the case, you know. So I'm curious as to what y'all see, you know, in mainstream medicine or traditional Western medicine.
From a lactation point of view, I think people do really address the structure and the function aspect of it, but what they're lacking, they're also addressing the body aspect, but they're lacking the integration. So for us, it's about this whole integration of all of it. And what they're doing is, or mainstream is, we saw recently a post that was like a checklist for what to do if your baby has a tongue tie. And then the person said, go do 2 to 3 sessions of body work. And we were like, well, that's not true for everybody, because you have to look at the individual, at the baby, at the family, at the unit, and see like what's going on with them. Because one baby might not really need a whole lot of body work. There might be other stuff going on. And one baby might need extensive amount of body work. So to tell people like, okay, like this is what you do, like you get diagnosed and then you go get chiropractic or whatever body work modality you want. And then you go get the release. And then Michelle gets the call from all these people when they're not getting their outcomes, because that's her big specialty, is when people have releases and then things still didn't shift. And so what I think what makes us different is we're looking at it as a very, very individual, like each person is going to be on their own different journey versus this is what you do for everybody blanket across the board. Do you guys want to add to that?
I feel like, Michelle, you could touch on like the history, because you've been in this world too, and just like what's current.
Yeah, you know, so from my perspective, I mean, 12 years ago was when I put literally one of the first integrative clinics in the country. I mean, it was like the new thing. So having guided frenectomies, that was me. We were doing that in the chair. And, you know, I was doing functional assessments. I was assessing the body. I was asking the body, I was checking the body for ranges of motion. And this was with everybody. This wasn't just infants. This was kids. This was adults. This was anybody who was going to get a frenectomy in our office. And so I feel like for me, but see, that's my design. I am foundational. I am big picture. I am about consciousness and embodiment, and you're gonna, you know, if you decide you want something, I'm gonna ask you, and then what? And then what? And then what? Because at the end of the day, this is about your human experience. And when I'm looking at infants, especially like the surgery course I teach, the perioperative experience is literally a consciousness embodiment course, and how we take that window of doing a frenectomy and literally take that theta brain moment and embed and imprint the new pattern. Bam. We don't wait. We don't let things adjust. We don't want them to have to like do an interim like moment between the surgery and getting to a body worker. Bam, I want it right then. And it's unbelievable. I taught these ladies how to do it. And it is mind-blowing what you can achieve when you capitalize on every point of design that we have as a human. And so when 12 years ago, when we started doing this, literally, you know, we were the fly-in, drive-in, blah, 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 and getting amazing results, life-changing results. And then I've watched this industry grow into very compartmentalized, but they call it integrative, right? But it's very compartmentalized. So actually what we did was we took it back to even further than that, almost the ancient model of when a midwife would have done a frenectomy right then after birth to get the baby to breast, right? Or to like correct the functional piece. The only thing I'm seeing now is that we've got a huge spontaneous movement piece missing in these kids. These kids don't move. They're not fluid. They're not mobile. They're not stable, mobile, and agile from the beginning, as they have the capability and potential to be. So bringing that all together is the most important part for me. So what I'm seeing is that that's going away again. Anytime you create an industry, you see this compartmentalization and things fall through the cracks. So that's, you know, like after I had a frenectomy, how many years ago was that now? 9 years ago, probably close to 9 years ago. And within 2 weeks, I was in the hospital fighting for my life. So that, yeah, I mean, my whole right side collapsed. I ended up with a appendicitis, sepsis, a collapsed lung. I had 3 surgeries within 3 months. I lost 25 pounds, I almost died. My whole right side just gave up the ghost. And so that opened my eyes to the potential of what we're dealing with here with people, with kids, with anybody that is, we'll call it jacked up that high and then gets let down that quickly. There's a graciousness to it that's missing. Let's just say that. Yeah. Did that answer the question? I get wound up.
Go off on tangents. I do too. Well, I was like, what was my question? Basically with what's going on in mainstream medicine right now, but you answer like it's extremely compartmentalized right now.
It's even in the integrative models, it's incredibly compartmentalized and it lacks the foundation. So the way I explain this is, if I've got a baby that I'm working with and they've got a significant restriction, if I'm going to give them full function, I feel like I have to do the due diligence to make sure they have the power in the system to run the new system. If they don't have power, stability, mobility, agility in their bodies to open up and extend and begin that growth trajectory that we're trying to establish, they're going to collapse. they have more drains than they have gains. And that system is going to implode. And that's when everybody goes off the rails. So you can get beautiful results, and dentists get pissed at me because I will call that stuff out. I'm like, yeah, beautiful result. Here it is 6 months later, we're fully collapsed. And they're like, well, I did a great job. I'm like, you did a beautiful job. But now this kid's even further under the bus because nobody matched their power capacity to the functionality you gave them. And gave them the ability. It just like you walking up to me and handing me a 250-pound weight and going, okay, girl, let's go. It's the same thing with the mouth. The kids don't have the capacity to run that much freedom, we'll call it. So you've got to bring them up to the point where they're like, yeah, I got this. I can open, I can be in the world. I can, woo, let's do it. And then we sail.
Right.
And we had an example of that just recently with a baby that he actually did need a release, and he had zero power to begin with, like was lacking a lot of vitality, almost like the will to live seemed pretty low in him. He had lost a lot of weight, and it was very apparent that he would benefit from a frenectomy. And I actually called Michelle in for this baby because the family was like at their wits' end, and they're like, we want to do it now. Like, let's go. And I'm like, he doesn't have the power. He does not have the vitality. And for a moment, it was like we had to put the brakes on this because yes, we knew it was going to be helpful for him, but we also knew that if we did it at that time, he would go straight into collapse, and he didn't have the resources enough. Like he wasn't charged up enough to get through that and to go through the healing process. So I think she was probably crying like half the visit that we were there. And it was like a lot, but we ended up doing like a full feeding plan and waiting for a few weeks until we were able to get them outside more. They put like a kiddie pool outside and started like going in the pool outside with him daily and doing all these things just to kind of like charge him up. And we finally took him for release. It was 3 weeks ago now. And he is doing phenomenal, like amazing. And the mom, like he had never transferred any milk. He had a lot of restrictions. And the first 24 hours, he had already transferred an ounce at the breast, which at 8 weeks old, he had never transferred any milk prior to that. And then the next time I saw him, he transferred like 2 ounces. And then the next time he did 2.5 ounces. So he's thriving. He's doing really well, but it took a long time to get there. And it's like working with these families, a lot of times you might identify, yes, it is necessary, but you have to work on building up the baby and building up the family first. Otherwise, it isn't going to be a good outcome.
Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe y'all could elaborate on that a little bit. It's like when you actually you're like, okay, this is a good candidate for a surgical release or a laser release or whatever people have available. What's a good candidate, or what would you say, let's refer you for a release? And then what are the, like for you, what are the signs that you're like, okay, let's refer you for a release, but let's also wait because we gotta, like your child is showing this and we want to build up the vitality.
Yeah, I'll touch on that a little bit. I think the first piece is matching belief systems with the family and knowing like, we have people come in that say like, I don't want any type of frenectomy. I don't want any type of surgery. I want to do this all through whatever you guys have to offer. And we're willing to do whatever. So that's a whole different conversation with somebody versus somebody who's coming in and saying, I scheduled a frenectomy and then we're like seeing their baby and we're like, oh, you're not right. There's like no sense of readiness within you or the baby in the dyad. And so I think there's specific indicators, and a lot of it has to do with the energetics of the baby. And it's like, for example, like the tissue integrity, like what is their tissue? Like, what is their body? Like, how much can they move? How open can they get at the breast? How much extension do they have? And then I think in Natalie and I's work too, is it depends on what's happening week to week. Like, are they able to hold these like spaces and this movement that we've helped them create? Are they able to hold that week to week to week or appointment to appointment, however we set it up? And if that's not happening, then there's other, like Michelle was saying, there's other drains, and we have to find out where those drains are and why aren't they turning into gains to help them create that. I think a good way to put it is, Michelle will always talk about, like, you're not gonna, when you go in for a frenectomy, if it's scissors, laser, whatever, you're gonna give them a V8 motor, or however you say, like, I'm trying to, but you're gonna give them a motor, and their body doesn't have the capability to match that type of power at the breast or efficiency at the breast. So we have to create a body that matches what they're going to receive, the freedom that they're going to receive in the mouth. So I think certain indicators, it's all foundational for the most part.
Ooh. So what do y'all think about, I'm gonna just keep interviewing y'all. The most common tie releases I see are the posterior tongue or the anterior tongue, and the lip or buccal in the cheek. What are y'all like? Can y'all share any specifics about those specific locations?
Related to what?
Well, maybe it's a great question. What
Well, I will just say
people-
the posterior tongue tie, the posterior, even that term has come online more in like the last year, I would say. It's like becoming more of a thing. And the amount of change that we have seen through body work with the posterior tongue tie is incredible. So like addressing the body, seeing how far you can get, the appearance of the frenums will change. And so the posterior, like we always like talk about other practitioners in other places, like going in and getting the posterior aspect. Like, what are you actually doing? What are you actually lasering? What kind of tissue are you going through? Muscle? Like what's actually happening there? And why is it not available? I think asking that question, or asking different questions when you're being told that you have something posterior, it's like, why isn't it coming forward? That's a really great
one of the things that I teach that in postural blueprint method and the perioperative experience is that the relationship between the posterior aspect and the cervical spine and the cranial base. That's why there are not clear lines of demarcation for surgery. So once you have access to those places of the body and you begin to create, see, my whole thing is create, utilize, and maintain space. That's an airway. So how you create, utilize, and maintain space determines what kind of airway you have. And so the thinking is that, if we do frenectomy, then we get more space. Well, not until you have the ability to maintain the space and you have the function that supports the maintenance of the space. This is all like logic and philosophy, right? Duh. So here's the thing. It's like, typically the way frenectomy providers are taught to address the posterior is to lay the baby flat, to open the mouth to the chin, and then go down in the floor of the mouth and compress the genioglossus and then laser between the two muscles. The way I teach my providers to do it is address the cranial base and the cervical spine and the hips and the width of the body. And then then that frenum appears in the field. So you don't have to go get it. You don't have to compress anything. And then you can actually set the posture and the brain to the frame in that moment so that it doesn't collapse. So actually in what you're doing, and I do this in perioperative experience, I swaddle people, and I'll swaddle the doctors and I put them on the flat surface just like they do in surgery. And then I reach in the mouth and I show them what we're doing when we go for the posterior aspect. And they're all like, whoa, hold on. I'm like, really? What's wrong? You can't breathe? Why can't you breathe? Do you want to cry? Does it hurt? I mean, I'm just a bitch about it, because this is what our kids are feeling. And then I show them a different way to do it. And they're like, oh, well, hell, I'm like, yeah, isn't that cool? And so when you've got something in the field and you're not having to compress and distress and collapse tissue to get it, you can ask different questions and everything goes completely differently. So the whole thing about the 7 frenums is, and this is what's not happening right now, is we are not evaluating to the capacity standard of that patient
Mm,
and a functional optimal map of what needs to happen. So we kind of go in and go, oh, well, these are the symptoms and this is the appearance and they're having a hard time. So it must be a tie. Let's cut it.
mhm.
But if you don't marry the 2 pieces, the 20% and the 80%, and get all the dynamics going and flowing in the nervous system to literally make that as supple as it can to respond, then you can't tell if that tissue is actually the reason for your problem.
Right.
So the whole thing about the buckles, I started that. That was me 12 years ago. I introduced that at the IATP World whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I started talking about why aren't people evaluating all 7
All the frenulums.
frenums? Because they don't know what the functional standard of evaluation is. They don't know why you would do that. So I won't tell the story about how that initially happened, but what you're looking at is where the frenums are connecting the musculature to the bone and then what's happening there. And then you have to ask, is it reason or response? And so, you know, the way I teach people to do exam is, it looks a little bit different than others. But what you're doing is you're asking the muscle groups, how are you connected to the bone? And is there an interference here that's able to be made supple because it's nervous system response, or is this an actual attachment that's a friend that's overextended its visit and needs to be asked to pull back, right? So people don't understand functional exam and also how those frenums fit into the other frenulums of the cranium. A lot of that's osteopathic principles, but once you understand all that, then you're like, oh, okay, I can see the advantage, or I can see the actual danger of cutting that right now.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
when you're talking about hypermobile kids, you know, that frenum could be holding them together. Slow down, you know, it's like, everybody hold on. We need to get them some activation going before we actually set them free.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like there's like no universal standard of, like you said, assessing patients, or assessing kiddos, grown-ups, whatever age group. And it's very similar in the I would say postpartum world. Like, we deal with it a lot with core stuff. You know, when we're looking at the 3 most common core and pelvic floor dysfunctions, DRA, urinary incontinence, and prolapse. There's no standard there. And, you know, what we try to get across is look at the body as the big picture. You know, DRA is not, it's not the reason for, you know, back pain. It could be correlated, but it's never like, they're never right. The reason could be right there next to prolapse, but it's never the reason. So yeah, okay. So going back and looking at the whole body, can you elaborate on, or either any one of y'all, how y'all take the whole body into the big picture, and maybe what I know I asked you in the email, the postural blueprint, and expanding on that with a little one, maybe.
Michelle will definitely speak to the postural blueprint specifically because that's her thing. But in our course, we do have, so the course is broken up into different modules. I think seven modules.
67, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's broken up into those different modules. And in one of the modules specifically is the movement module. And the movement module is the basis of what we're trying to teach parents to help their babies with. And so instead of like having the baby go see a practitioner, which sometimes is necessary, we are giving the parents tools that they can use with their baby at home to help their baby move. And then Michelle can elaborate on the actual, what the postural blueprint is.
Yeah, I think the other piece, well, I think Molly, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, talk about this in relationship to growth trajectory and how we want to posture humans, right? So like the primitive posturing of human beings. And the cool part about Michele's work is it maps over so well with like biogeometric integration, BGI in chiropractic, and then it maps over to bowspring posturing in yoga. But she just applied it to infants, which is like revolutionary, truly. And I'm so grateful for that gift. I'm so grateful that you have that gift and you give it to us. But really thinking about how do we want humans to posture as adults, and how can we help infants move into those spaces and stabilize there and maintain it throughout their growth trajectory. And then you can even cross over the body pieces to milestones, like what's happening in milestone development. How are they activating when they're doing their cross crawl? How are they activating when they're doing their rolling? And then when they're standing and their bear crawl, and all the things that you guys touch on, and BIRTHFIT is huge. But a lot of babies aren't able to get into those positions because they have a lack of movement. Posturally, we could say posture, but it's really like the neurology, the fascial pieces, and the tissue in general.
Right.
I think another way that that we've taken a different angle on the whole oral dysfunction piece is the the powering up of the dyad. So the mom is the primary battery, right? And so the baby is the second part, or the second piece of that battery, and it's literally there to pull charge from the mom while it builds its own battery and own charge. And so that has to happen connected. It has to happen connected to the earth. It has to happen connected to the sun. And so our big push is you've got to get connected to these sources to charge your own battery so your baby's battery can charge. And so when people come to me for, issues like with we're not sleeping or we're, whatever, and I'm like, circadian rhythm matching, get outside, get your feet on the ground, get your body in the sun. When moms talk about lack of milk production, I'm like, put your breasts in the sun. Titties in the sun, everybody. This is no joke. Like, your life depends on it, literally. And then the mom will be like, 48 hours later, she's like, we've got milk everywhere. I'm like, oh, how about that? Cool. And so it's using all the resources around us, right? And I call it like ancient future technology. So we think we're so evolved and we think we're so special because we've got all this stuff around it that's really just draining us. But we've really got to reach way back and recover all of the ancestral pieces that got us here in the first place, because we've been eliminating those all along. So now I notice it's funny because here I am going into 15 years of this field. And what I've noticed that every 3 to 5 years, there'll be a big shift in the kids. And then now it's getting quicker, right? It's like every couple of years, we're noticing big shifts. And I get calls from people who have big craniofacial teaching, and they're like, okay, what's going on? And I'm like some kind of witch in the woods going, well, we've had another shift, but what's happening is the parents, their mothers specifically, are getting more and more sedentary and more closed and more drained. And the babies are just magnifying that. And so as we turn the power on and we get up and we get moving, and I tell you, I get these moms who, I'm like, if you'll just get in the floor and do an Awaken Your Bow class with us, blah, blah, blah. And in the 0 to 3-year-old crowd, we can literally begin to get their mouths closed. The power starts to come on. Things begin to change because the movement is entrained in the dyad. And all of a sudden now they've got something to map off of and something to wave form with. And there's a pulse there that actually brings the power up and the functionality to these spaces that were closed and dense and not flowing.
Yeah,
So
and I think that even goes preconception.
Yeah, totally.
You're
Absolutely.
mapping yourself, and then in pregnancy, you're mapping your baby in pregnancy.
Yep. Yeah.
What I was thinking about just then, like, all the all the moms that actually moved during pregnancy, all the moms that actually moved
Yep.
pre-conception. I don't want to say it's easier, but it's a smoother transition. It's a
It's
smooth.
easier.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
easier.
I
It's straight
had
up easier. Let's just say it. It's just straight up easier.
Yeah, no, I had a mom that was a farmer, and she's like a flower farmer, and her baby literally kind of fell out, and it was her first baby, and the midwife didn't even make it to her house, and we were just like, it's because you were moving. Like she
Yeah.
was squatting all the time, she was moving, and she was like, I had no idea that it was going to happen that fast because all my
And she
friends, it
literally
took,
squatted down to have her baby.
yes, she was
Like,
squatting.
that's what you
Yeah.
do all day.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had I've been pregnant 8 times. I have 5 children. They were all born naturally. I never pushed for any of them. I mean, you know, and everybody's like, well, that's just you. And I'm like, you know what? I was really active and I took care of my hips, and I'd been to nursing school. I'd seen the stuff that happened. I wasn't going to have that. So I learned everything I could back 30 years ago about what natural childbirth, home birthing. I was called a child abuser because I had babies at home. You know, it was illegal in Alabama to have a home birth,
It
you
might
know.
still be illegal in Alabama. I don't know.
It might still, I think it actually changed, but you know, I mean, yeah, anyway, but yeah, movement is life. When somebody's
Yeah.
not breathing, I look at how they're moving, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of breastfeeding issues are related to breathing. And if you're not feeding, you might not be breathing, and you're definitely not moving. So you
Mhm.
get them moving, you get the breath established, and then you see where the feeding is. And so all of that goes together.
And I think that's something you guys do really well in BirthFit is the movement and the breath piece.
Mhm.
And then I think the thing that Michelle brings in that's really unique and just unique is that she's going to talk about all the quantum pieces. She's going to talk about the foundational pieces like sunlight and the non-native EMF radiation, like all the things that are unseen.
The biohacking things that people call
But honestly, it's just really, it's like the ancient future stuff. It's the things that our ancestors were doing and didn't have exposure to, or did have exposure to, right? And the way that they were moving and just living and being.
I think about the wisdom of our elders, and like, I'm almost 60 years old now, and I'm like, you know what? People, a lot of women get into their victim archetype, their shadow with, well, I don't have, and I don't blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? Most of success is in what you don't do, not what you do and what you have. You can be very stripped down and basic with things and get a lot of amazing outcomes and results just by utilizing what you have around you. And that's what I love about what we created in Midline Revolution is you don't have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. You don't have to, it's just like, get moving. We'll show you how to do it. We'll show you how to move your baby. We'll show you how to do it together.
And you don't have to spend a ton of money on practitioners. You don't have to spend a ton of money on this like whole thing, the package.
Yeah. So let's kind of break down the course just a little bit so people know this is a course for parents, right? Like, or for anybody really. So whether they're a coach in here and they want to take it, whether they're a chiropractic student,
IBCLC,
we've got some acupuncturists, I'm trying to think. We've got PTs, we've got OBs in here, but really anybody could take y'all's course, huh?
Yeah.
And it's 7 modules, one or the other. And it's stuff it's simple, not easy, effective stuff you could do at home. And it kind of gives an overview, I would say, of y'all's philosophy and where you're coming from. And I think it arms parents with education that they're not going to get elsewhere. Do you want to add anything about the course?
No, just, if you feel like if you're living in an area where you feel like you don't have like support or people, join the community. We'll do stuff right there, talk about lactation. Natalie's a genius lactation consultant. I mean, she can, boom, get you a thing, bam, right then.
Awesome.
I love that. And Molly's, really good with, talking about structure and like things to do. And I'm all about the philosophy. I'm all about the mindset. I'm like, get your damn mind right, and then you're going to fly, and so we kind of like cover it all that way. And yeah, the community is really small right now. And so you get a lot of attention.
Cool.
Yeah. And I would also say like the 30-day discovery has been really beautiful for the women that don't have a community near them or don't have a practitioner that they're actively working with. The way that we design that, it's a very low, I think it's $79, very low price point. But it'll take you through a series of like homework, essentially things to do at home with your baby and how to be with your baby throughout 5 weeks or the 30 days. And I think it's just a different offering. There's no online course that I've ever come across that is like that 30-day discovery specifically. And so marrying the two with the education, because we always talk about the way people learn, right? It's like auditory, visual, kinesthetic. And the auditory piece and the visual piece is very present in the Midline Revolution, our flagship course. And then the kinesthetic piece is very much present in the 30-day discovery. So trying to like really match how individuals learn and how they can absorb information. And
I always tell people, like, when they're in the midst of the oral dysfunction rabbit hole, that there's a gift here for you. Do you want it? Do you want to have this experience and actually learn something new about yourself? Because guess what? If you're having oral dysfunction as an infant, you're going to be back here again when they get tonsils and adenoids, when those things come online at 18 months, 2 years old, and then you're going to get to decide, do you want to have surgery? And then guess what? Somebody's going to tell you have a narrow palate. And then guess what? You get to decide if you want to have an expander. And then guess what? You get to decide later on if you want to do phase 2. I mean, this industry is well laid out now with all kinds of opportunities to spend lots of money.
Oh, yeah.
So you're going to get to know yourself, what you believe, how you feel about things, how to do as much of this integrative work you can for yourself, because this is the trajectory that you're headed down.
Yeah, when you paint that picture, hopefully parents are, soon to be mom looking back going, yeah, that's not the route I want to take.
Yep, you're
knowing
right.
that, that's probably the route I took as a kid, as somebody that grew up with asthma, expanders, braces, orthodontists. Just couldn't breathe. But started with breastfeeding, probably started with movement in my mom.
I always tell people that the amount of information that's available now, which isn't new information, like we've hit on, this is all old information, but our parents and like their parents, they didn't really have access to this information like we do. So they did the best that they could, like they were like, we're doing the best that we can. But now I'm really excited to see these kids from this generation, to see what they do in the future and what they look like in the future, because they have access to so much really amazing, life-changing information.
Yeah, absolutely. The internet, they got, for better or worse, they have the internet at their fingertips. Question. Okay, so everyone check out their course. We'll put the link below this video, the recording. We'll send it out with this video. I know y'all probably get asked this a lot, and I meant to bring this up earlier because somebody wanted me to touch on this, but what is y'all's take on like MTHFR gene variation, and how that plays into midline stuff? Like,
You want me to go for it,
Michelle?
We have thoughts.
Yeah, I know. So let them rip.
Molly, why don't you go first?
Okay, cool. I feel like that piece is definitely present. It's definitely there. I wouldn't negate the fact that that's happening. But I do feel like we have demonized MTHFR, and we've created this story that this is what's happening. And it's tightening all of these things. And it just comes back to the foundation for me literally every time. It comes back to how charged and how turned on is your human? How much are you in rapport with your environment in which you're living? Are you living an indoor lifestyle? All of those factors for me, like what's your light environment like? How much EMF radiation are you receiving? How much blue light are you? Yeah, I could say like a million just like biohacky things. But they're not really biohacky things. It's really just like how close to nature are you living? The further we get away from that, the more our body is going to express in mutation or gene variation because it's trying to hold itself together. So I would say it's present, but I would say
this equals this.
Yeah, I would say you're doing yourself and your family a disservice by zooming in on that and not taking the 365 or 360 square view. I can't speak today. I'm pregnant.
Molly's overextending her circle.
I need to be, yeah. So all of my analogies aren't really working. However, I hope you get the picture. It's like, if you can really zoom out and get the bird's eye view, I think that's what you do. That's when you do your family a huge service, and the future generations, whoever else you're going to bring through.
Yeah.
I think that it's become another scapegoat for outsourcing. And here's the thing, it's the genetics, loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger.
Absolutely.
Boom. So here's the thing. I believe that our bodies are so capable that even if we are born with a broken pathway, that the body in its genius, if we are honoring natural law and we are honoring the way that it wants to live on the earth, closest to nature as possible, that it can find a way, right?
Yeah.
We can find a way. And I've watched this whole MTHFR and tongue tie thing develop. And first it was demonizing folic acid, and then it was methylfolate, and now it's folinic acid, the latest EDS thing from Tulane that came out. Now it's folinic acid. I'm like, okay, awesome. And at the same time, eating a clean diet, being in nature, being in the sun, honoring the circadian rhythm, season, also making your humanity meaningful, all of that actually forgives a lot of sin, if you will. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We have the ability, it doesn't have to become the focus and run your life, and this is, I think people get off track with, let me find something to blame. Let me find something that's
scapegoat.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're conditioned in it in the West. And I talk about this all the time is, digging up the, like shining some light on the shadow in the dark spaces, because we don't know what we don't know. And, just remembering what we do know and what gives us the best outcome, when we focus there, then we start getting things illuminated in a way that we didn't know before. So the scapegoat mentality is a big.
And that all comes back to like what you mentioned with the parents, the dyad. So how regulated a mom is how regulated her family's going to be, and how she's going to view her child. Is she going to view her child that something's wrong with them right off the bat because they have this MTHFR diagnosis, or is she going to ask another question and be like, okay, how is this serving you right now? How did that manifest? And also, how is it serving you? And how can we support you naturally moving forward?
That's good. Nervous system regulated, all of it. Anybody got any other questions? I know I was like rapid fire, but
while that's dropping in, I'll just say, if you've traveled and you've been around the world and you've been with people in other cultures and other environments, and here's the thing, the question I ask is, why are we here in the United States seem to make it a bigger deal than a lot of other people in other parts of the world? And what I find is that the moms who are really close to the earth and living in community, almost in the tribal sense from which we came, they're dancing and singing and chanting and praying and all of the things that bring meaning to this human experience. They have a lot less incidence of all the things that we blame on tongue tie in this culture. So I would just say, open up your world, dance, sing, chant, pray, sit by the fire, find your tribe, create tribe if you don't have one, and let your body do its thing. And, you know, if you need a frenectomy, you need a frenectomy, but it's, you don't hang everything that's wrong in your world on it.
Yeah. It's so true. Like what you're saying is, you know, I think not just about frenectomy or tongue ties, but it's birth. Like one of my mentors, Yolanda, she always like, we make birth so much more complicated than it is. It's simple, like straightforward.
Yep.
And it's our attachments too, right? It's
Yeah.
our attachments to it all.
Yep.
And we
Very
see a lot of,
attached.
see a lot of families come in, not a lot, but there have been a handful that they could go either way. They tend to be better off because they're just like, well, I'm here to like do whatever is great for my baby, instead of saying like, we need a frenectomy, or like, we're not having, you know, the attachments either way, the polarity there, and just being like open to the process. Yeah. And Michelle brought up a good point. We talk a lot about this in Hawaii. I talk a lot about this because it's very relevant in my life, marrying somebody from there, and just like that local culture, their babies thrive and they eat shit and they watch so much TV and they drink so much beer. And I'm like, why is your baby thriving at the breast? And then I see this other mom come in that's doing all of the things and they're really struggling.
Checking all the boxes. Yeah.
Checking every box. And so to me, that paradox is like, they're really in rapport with where they live. They're really in rapport with their community.
And they're happy.
Yes.
They're happy. They're so happy. They're out with their ohana on the weekends, and they're, you know, the aunties are kumu hula, and everybody goes to hula, and everybody, you know, and so they're so happy. There's so much joy there. And it's beautiful.
They're being. They're being. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. It was a life lesson today. So Michelle, do you still train practitioners? Did I read that right on your website?
Yeah, that's primarily what I'm doing. And it's not just, here's the thing, and this is another thing I've gotten away from is training practitioners. Everybody wants to be trained, right? But what I find is when I'm really working with practitioners, a lot of these practitioners end up like not even wanting to work with tongue tie anymore. They're just like, I'm so done with this conversation. I'm so fucking done with this. And so they end up going and doing other things. So I'm actually like helping people get out of that world if they want to. But
showing them the door.
Yeah, but like for example, Molly, I mean, she's laughing because she's like, yeah, I know how to do all that. And then she does 5 other things too. And it's like not a big deal anymore for her. So I kind of help practitioners make it not a big deal. And I help
and you
them
train the practitioner to get to know themselves.
Oh yeah, it's
That's
all
the
an
big
inside
point.
job. And that's one of the things I tell people all the time is, you know, go to embodied practitioners. If you want to really make tracks, go to embodied. There's so many practitioners out there who are not embodied.
Yeah.
They don't move. They're not connected to nature. They're not happy. Their relationships are crap. You know, go to embodied practitioners. You'll get there faster because this is a field, in our field, kind of a solution. It's not a right technique, right practitioner, right da-da-da-da-da. This is a big morphogenetic field answer, and find those people.
Find those people, put them on your birth team, put them on your breastfeeding team.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to run over. I really appreciate y'all giving us your time, introducing the work y'all do. And yeah, big supporters here. So whatever we can do, let us know. And yeah,
Thank you,
Find,
guys.
find,
You're
go to
doing
the
it.
website.
You're doing it. You're getting these moms moving. You're getting people moving and
Starts with
taking care of their
movement.
bodies. And, you know, people just in this wild world today need to focus on, how do I be happy? How do I create family? How do I create community? How do I dance, chant, sing, and pray? You know, how do I do that?
Amen.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank y'all so much. And
Thank you for
thanks
having
for
us.
putting y'all's brains together and your hearts. And safe travels to you too.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We'll be in touch. Happy Thursday, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.